the good side now. We're not going to go back to the era of orange skies and orange water. Mark Fitz comes from the coal country of America, and we're just not going to do that. And so I think what we need to recognize that environmental policy is part of our culture, and it's part of our society, and it's good business on top of it. And I think we take that reasonable approach to it. I think that's a winning combination. I owe you the floor from our last town hall.
Thank you.
Yes.
There are two gentlemen in the scholars. I'm glad the first question, you said there is some dispute about whether there's difficulty getting mortgages and insurance if you have these properties. And I think I've got at least a partial solution to that. And my question actually on the card is, would you please try to attend a forum in Bath on the 26th, which is on the rights of landowners. And we had this forum in Horsehead, and I say we because it's part of the organization I belong to. We had this forum in Horsehead a while back. About 100 people came who weren't like, you know, the anti-gas thing. They were mostly couples, often older couples, who were really having some problems. They wanted to terminate leases which were, you know, specified for like 5 years, and the companies were using a policy called force majeure that they couldn't get out of the leases. There's also a lot of questions on mechanics liens. You know, is anybody familiar with that? But one of the people who participates is Joe Heath, and he's a counsel for the Onondaga Nation, and he is a lawyer. He will look at people's leases and tell you what you need to do legally pro bono. It's on here. And there's information about, most people know that the infrastructure, even if fracking isn't in New York, the infrastructure to permit it is going crazy. I know, a quarter mile from my house, they're already building pipelines. That means a lot of eminent domain. My neighbors even a lawsuit. So you need to, sorry? Compulsory integration. If you don't know about these issues, and even if you want to continue the gas lease for whatever reason, you should be aware of the possibility of, like in Bradford County, getting liens on your property put on by the companies that Chesapeake is retaining. Also, the Bradford County Commissioners is trying to get the Senate to deal with the companies like Chesapeake who decrease the royalties often dramatically to pay the landowners. So Tom, I'm really hoping you and you encourage, you know, our state senators and assemblymen. I have more copies.
Time and place. Time and place.
August 26th, Bath Fire
7
Hall.
o'clock, Bath Fire Hall.
7 p.m.
What's the organization?
Well, there's several here.
Citizens
The
can,
organization you represent, I just wonder what organization you represent.
I'm with People for a Healthy Environment, which is primarily based in Horsehead, but there's several organizations targeting.
Citizens Campaign for the Environment, Citizens for Healthy Communities, Fleeced, and People for a Healthy Environment.
But it's a textbook of accurate information, all documented. So, you know, think about it. If you want to continue to lease, that's okay, but a company shouldn't be forced to make you do that.
One additional topic on this issue. Do you believe that global warming is happening? 2, do you understand that global warming is caused by human action since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution? And then Ruth asked if you've seen a particular, I'm guessing it's a movie, I'm having trouble reading.
Chasing Ice by James Baylock.
Chasing Ice by James
Yeah.
Baylock. Okay. I haven't seen
It's
the
a
movie.
documentary.
I haven't seen the movie, so I appreciate that.
Google.
And we'll definitely, it's Google. We can Google it. Sure, the global warming issue. Obviously, I don't think polluting our environment is good. I don't believe that policies that will encourage that or reward that are good. You know, the whole debate of global warming is something that you know, you can go on and on and on about. The fact is the globe is warming up. Is that naturally occurring? Is that, does human behavior contribute to it? Sure, I mean, the pollution is not good. And that is gonna have negative impacts on it. So why don't we, then this is where I think we need to have the conversation in a different way. And this is where Senator Begich and I from Maine had a really good conversation. And I said, you know, sometimes when we get into this issue,
He's from Alaska.
He's a Democrat. He's a
From Alaska.
What'd I say?
Maine.
Thank you. See, that's why I love town hall, because it's like immediate correction right there. So I appreciate that. I see
Democrat.
it is Alaska. That's true. I'm sorry. I was with a couple from Maine last year.
Wrong part of the country.
That's weird.
Collins and King, the independent.
What's that?
Senator Collins and Senator King, the independent.
Okay.
Republican and independent.
And we'll the conversation I had with the senator, and this is what I was trying to get to, is what we should, we in this issue, a lot of times we spend so much time arguing over this issue on global warming. But if we both agree, and this is just how I operate, this is what I try to do, bring people together, solve problems. We both agree that pollution is bad, because we do. I think everyone agrees with that. Why don't we focus on uniting, coming together, implementing policies that mitigate pollution, and not get into this today on the other issue and yell at each other and call each other names and all these other things. So I think that's a more productive conversation, and I think the senator and I, and there was a large group of people in that room when we conducted that forum. We left there saying, that's good, because now we can come together, Democrat and Republican, and come up with solutions to the problems of pollution. And that's what we should be doing more of, and we're going to continue to do that.
Can I ask a follow-up question about that?
Sure.
One of the great things that you have is you represent a district that's full of really good educational systems. I made my career at a local community college, but we have Cornell. You went to, I think, Auburn?
Oh, Alfred.
Alfred, I'm sorry.
See, now Alfred's in, Alfred's in the district.
But great school, and we have
We
a
have great
fine
institutions.
pool of educated people. We have technical colleges. And I hear you speaking, and I do believe in science. I think my biggest, when people say to me, why aren't you Republican? I say, well, I kind of believe in science. And if you look at the people that you vote for to chair the science committee, you can say you want to get together, but I've looked at these people and I've read their things, and quite frankly, they don't believe in the scientific method. And that's not a Republican issue. That's not a Democratic issue. That's not an independent issue. So long as one, and it's your caucus, because you control the Congress at the planet, you have people running the science committees who don't believe in the scientific method. And you vote for them. So you can say you get together, but I quite frankly am flabbergasted that you, who is educated, who represents an area full of, smart people who might not have gone to college and smart people, vote for people to lead those scientific committees who don't believe in the scientific method and are quite upfront about it. And what are you going to do about it?
What we do is I can only control what I do. I can't control what other people do. And what I do is I sit and I talk and I work and I try to build collaborations. I try to be part of groups that do that. We're part of the Go Big Coalition, the Labels Group. We will stand and have the conversation and base it on facts, science, and data. And people that don't, and I will tell you, I've had conversations with folks on the other side of the aisle that have totally disregarded
Well, I'm talking
science.
about the scientific method, which is not a political.
No, and I agree. And there are people that disregard on the other side of the aisle, the scientific method. And it's not, and when we get into this debate, it really, because the problems and the issues are so significant, that sometimes this leads to personal animosity. This leads to gridlock, and I am frustrated, just like every other American, about the gridlock in Washington. We don't throw bombs. We don't go on TV doing that type of thing, because I don't think that's conducive to being a member of Congress who wants to get something done. So I will continue to do what I can control, meet with these groups, meet with these people, work with senators from Alaska on the other side of the aisle, work with other folks on a regular basis, team up with guys like Joe Kennedy to talk about reinvesting and recreating U.S. manufacturing. And I'm willing to do that because those are good ideas.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that, but given the structure of your congressional caucus, you can say all that stuff, but it's not gonna happen. So I think that's why people like me get frustrated.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you that you're stereotyping a whole group of people, and I really don't believe stereotyping is good activity.
How do you
Lumping everybody
stereotype in
together.
the chair of the science committee?
No, you're talking about the caucus, you're talking about the caucus and the conference, and then somehow you're associated with it, therefore you're all the same. And that's causing the breakdown.
I'm sorry, I did
in the
not mean
political
that, I was addressing, and I apologize.
Okay. Well, that's
I'm talking about the person who runs the caucus, which is very frustrating to those of us.
Which is different than the whole caucus.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
appreciate that.
I'm sorry, and you vote for him, so that's what.
I appreciate that.
You also included all Republicans.
Yeah, I'd
It's the caucus.
like
I'm
to switch
sorry.
gears here a little bit, if we could. I'm Roger Blue, the highway superintendent in this lovely town, and
Hey.
I really appreciate my job. We have a good town.
Yeah.
My question is, as you know, our whole areas, the storms are really getting violent.
Yeah.
Is there any kind of discussions around what we're gonna do in the future, going past the global warming and all the other things? The towns and counties are running out of money, we're losing roads.
And that's where our infrastructure needs in America. It all ties in highway I appreciate, Superintendent, what you do out there. I appreciate what you do on the roads, and I appreciate, Christmas Day, you guys out there plowing the roads, and when we represented towns and got to know many of those guys, it's a hard job, and I appreciate what you do. And what you're talking about is our need for infrastructure investment in America. Wholeheartedly agree. We have the primary revenue for infrastructure investment in America on the federal level comes from our gasoline taxes. And it's coming up about $60 to $70 billion short each year. And there are a whole slew of reasons. The magnitude of the problem is getting worse because we're not keeping up with the deterioration. Better gas mileage, all those things that contribute to it. Things like that. So we got to come up with an alternative. How are we going to replace the revenue? Now this is something that I'm willing to explore in regards to natural gas. Natural gas, we've talked and been trying to work on a proposal to deal with putting a fee on any export of natural gas if that ever occurs. And having that fee paid for by non-Americans receiving that export, and then the money coming off of that would go into American infrastructure. Why do I like that? Because that's non-Americans, non-American hardworking taxpayer dollars rebuilding our infrastructure on that fee. So we have to come up with a creative way to fill in that revenue loss. One other thing we're talking about is we have 100 million acres of fallow land in our interstate highway system. That's a tremendous amount of acreage that goes underutilized. So I've asked the Department of Transportation to do a study and say, what is the best way to utilize that land in an economically viable manner that will produce a revenue line that can go to our infrastructure. Now that won't bridge that deficit, but it's at least a step in the right direction.
Well,
So now-
not to jump in
No,
there,
but-
but you was talking about the TMDLs and all that. The rural town of Erin has to follow the same regulations that New York City would have to follow, City of Elmira, Town of Horset. That's what you mentioned earlier. I would dare say, I don't know, I've been highway superintendent, I don't know, probably too long, but in the last 8 to 10 years, that is magnified, I wouldn't be scared to say 50% more regulations on our town right here, about the ditching, about the putting the grass back, about the runoff, this, that, and the other thing. Now, I support that, but the problem is, we're all taxpayers here. We can only pay so much, and I just can't for the life of me understand why we have to follow the same regulations. And you can test our strings, whatever. We've had these, I'm the president of the association, so I get in these discussions quite a bit, but the thing of it is that our hands are tied. The law says you will do this, and this. So we have no choice. You touched on that in the beginning. Oh, it's your turn. But I appreciate your support on working on that.
And that's what we just, and I appreciate bringing it up to you. That's an idea, an example of regulations that is causing a concrete frontline impact that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And that's why we worked hard on the last transportation bill. And we got it implemented in MAP 21, the exemptions for those right-of-way enhancements, the Bridge Act, another thing where you had duplicate environmental reviews. I mean, we had that, the Ontario highway superintendent came and he did a presentation. He had a desk and he said, look, this is a bridge in Ontario County that is done with all local money. And it was one box. And then he goes, this is a bridge, same span, same type of bridge, that was done with some federal money came in. And it was about 6 boxes. And it was all that administrative compliance costs and everything and the pre-planning and all the duplication of efforts that were there. Significant loss of dollars going in the ground. So we're 100% in agreement with you as to how can we make those improvements more efficient and you're not spending as much money on paper as you're putting money in the ground to fix the problem. The other thing that I'm interested in as we deal with disaster and FEMA and disaster aid is reforming the programs to recognize, because one of the things I'm hearing around the district, and you correct me if I'm wrong, and a representative of multiple superintendents, is that we used to have a pretty good ability, but because our budgets are getting strapped, the ability to maintain the gullies and the ditches has been cut out. Because we just don't have the resources with everything else we're doing. So they're not up pruning back the trees.
Well,
not
you said I could interrupt you.
Yeah, please.
Right there is a regulation, why they're all regulated. I mean, we still have 41 miles of dirt road by the regulation, which means 41 miles of dirt road yet means 82 miles of ditch. We are not to expose the ditch. You see where your hands are tied, where you're supposed to work the road, but you're not supposed to touch the ditch. So typically, you're supposed to, in the new master plan, we would have to have a study done at a cost of $5,000 to $10,000. An expert would come in and study this. About October, he'd have it done, and let me tell you something, people would be a little pissed here if I didn't start working roads till October. You see what I'm getting at? That's a regulation that it's something that would be down around heavy 50,000 population or more. We're, almost 2,000 with 45 square miles.
Well, let's do this, Superintendent, because those are the ideas that I appreciate receiving. That's why we do town halls, to get the input. And you're touching on things that we would like to incorporate, and potentially, I mean, we have some great allies in the state. I mean, we got Tom O'Mara, Phil Palmisano, Chris Bren in the area, and we work as a team. We work really close together, just with Tom and Phil yesterday. And what we'll do, if this is a state issue, federal issue, let's work together, see if we can't streamline that process. Because the other one that came up to, because we just had the events in Cameron and Veteran, and I talked to the families up there.
Yeah, we had them here too.
You were up and over there.
Yeah.
And there was like 6 homes that just got wiped right out. We talked right to them. It was Thursday night when that happened, and Friday with the secondary storm. There's something about going into the upper hill gullies? There's some new regulation about the equipment that you can bring in there. Do you know anything about that?
Oh, yeah.
Heavy equipment going into the gullies to work on cleaning them out and things like that.
Yeah, we have a big advantage in Chemung County. Our soil and water district is very active with the highway departments, and if we didn't have them, we'd be, excuse my French, screwed.
Okay.
But there's
I thought you were gonna say something else.
No.
That sounds like everyone else.
Let it control my words, but there's a whole process that has to go through, which typically could be anywhere from 1 month to 6 months. A paper trail, there you're piling that desk full of paper again before you're allowed to go in there. Once that's all set in place, there's nothing wrong with the machine, you just need the correct document to go in there.
Okay.
And then if it's, of course, most of it's private property, there's easements, this, that, and the other things, we can't go on private property, but it wasn't that many years ago, if there was an issue in the creek, the rural town handled it. And it was like 25, 30 years ago, the county took control over the creeks because there was monies available. And then, probably 10, 12, 15 years ago, can't tell you the exact time, they said, hey, this is gonna cost us a lot of money, we're gonna give all this responsibility back to the town, but it's not our responsibility, because it's not ours. Most of the rural towns don't own the road, they're highway by use. The state is about the only one that owns the road. So we're very limited, 4 foot behind the ditch, we're in trouble. We're trespassing. So, but it's that paper trail that we need to work on, which you had mentioned. You obviously, you guys realize there's a big problem there, like with that bridge. That's a real good example. A state bridge would be $500,000. A town bridge, the same bridge, would be like 80, 90,000. And so no, that's a good example. So I don't know. I know you got a lot on your plate, but I don't know how you're going to handle this. But just work that in, would you?
And I appreciate it, and that's what we're trying to do, and that's why the closer to the government, it seems like that's the better government, in my opinion, and that's an example of it right there. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Our other real big issue, before we have a lot of further questions, so we're going to try and keep sure as quick as we can, is Obamacare.
the Affordable Care Act. George, I think may have a little bit of a misconception, so I want to air it. Your opposition to the Affordable Care Act is well known. Why did you vote in favor of providing health insurance to members of Congress, including yourself, for life? Not aware that vote exists. Do you have a plan for getting better health care to uninsured working people?
That's the question. All right, just so we're clear, because this does come up, there's a lot of misinformation on this. There is no, and there's no vote, there is no, remember? Yeah, whatever paper. What's that? Whatever paper, you definitely didn't quote correctly. We do not have health care for life as members of Congress, and rightfully so. We should be treated no differently than anyone else. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And so there is no health care. Just so you understand what our health care is, just to tell you how it works, is as a member of Congress, you come in, you pick from any of the plans that you could qualify for. They give you a list of about, there's at least a dozen of them in there. And the plan that worked for me and my wife, when we sat down and went through it, was the non-union postal plan. And so they give the non-union plans across the federal government, and you pick which one you go into. And then we contribute to the deductibles just like a non-union postal worker. So that's where we're at with that.
You get to keep that?
What's that?
Do you get to keep that?
No.
Oh, so you're gonna get affected too by these healthcare changes that are
Yes.
coming down the pipe, so that they're shoving it down your throat too.
Yeah, and that was a big contention. There were some people that were trying to get exempted and all that stuff, and again, I don't support that. And so we're gonna be put into the exchange, is my understanding of how this will go. And the staff will be put in the exchange.
So we would lose our current plan if we go into the exchange.
And you're happy about this? I mean,
If it's going to be a train wreck for you guys, it'll be a train wreck for us too.
Yeah.
yeah, well, I mean, I'm just saying, so we all suffer and we don't do anything about it, especially you have power, you have juice.
Well,
And we all have to suffer because we're gonna figure out that this is gonna wreck, that this is gonna destroy America, and nobody wants to do anything about it. Yeah, really. My wife works for a doctor, she just lost her job because the doctor he lost his private practice. He can't afford to do business anymore.
these are the stories that we hear across the district. These are the
Really?
cases of
It's
the
affecting
people that
my
are
bottom line
impacted
too, lady.
by this legislation. And we're not gonna get into name call, we're not gonna get into an argument. I understand the passion, I understand the anger, and we can't do that. And I am opposed to the law. I have a clear record, I've opposed it. I think it's bad policy. I think it's going to be that train wreck that Matt Falk has said. And we're gonna continue to take that position and continue to do what we can
Okay,
to
well,
prevent this
I
train
have a
wreck from
question
coming.
then. If you so, where the person went, disagree with the Affordable Health Care Act, then why has Congress, the Republicans, not put one bill forward to do something for the Americans who don't have it?
Right.
Yes, it is true. So I've been on the website, and I've seen what bills have been voted on and what's been passed. And it's dismal, first of all, compared to other Congresses, but there is nothing in there that you have done, or your party have done, to try and get Americans health care. And like him, I have a version, I have family members who don't have it, okay? But the Affordable Health Care Act is going to help. It's going to help a lot of Americans get it. And why don't the Republicans just concentrate on actually taking the part of the bill they don't agree with or making it better, because no bill's perfect, no law is perfect. But instead of doing that, you're going around telling people it's gonna destroy America, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And this is,
Social Security is not gonna destroy America.
could you, Tyrone, for questions, can you please answer the second part of the question?
What are we offering as an alternative? Is that what the question was?
Specifically, what are your ideas to
To
get health care to people who can't afford
So,
it?
totally issue in America. And this is where one of my fundamental objections to the Affordable Care Act is it doesn't get to the issue of cost of healthcare in America. In my opinion, it just
Premiums
does
have
not.
come down since it's been implemented.
That's not the data that I have seen, reviewed, and agree with.
What about Massachusetts?
The issue that we have to get to is how are we going to deliver care in America in a cost-effective, so the price of cost of care in America goes down to make it affordable. To me, there are better models out there. Now, there are some things in the Affordable Care Act that when you write a bill as big as that, you are going to come across some things that, okay, let's consider that. Let's have a kind of pre-existing condition. 26-year-old, okay, I'm with those, and that's already in New York, and we're already gone down that path. The issue of trying to move away from a fundamental, not worrying about preventive and maintenance care in America, that's something I think makes good quality healthcare, and it's smart, and it's effective. So we're on board with those provisions. What I want add though, that the Affordable Care Act doesn't get to, is it leaves in place people making healthcare decisions that are not the individuals and are not the doctors. So the Affordable Care Act, in my opinion, what you have done is empowered the government to be the one who's going to be making these decisions. And that's the best example of it in the law is the Independent Payment Advisory Board. And that is a problem, because if you do that, you lose the ability to have a healthcare in America that's transparent, and the utilization of healthcare in America, because individuals aren't engaged in that conversation and that exchange, is lost. And we need to change that dynamic. I want a more individual-based perspective healthcare in America. I want one that's based on the perspective of the patient and the doctors, and making sure, and so things like going away from fee-for-service to a capitated reimbursement model is very interesting to me, because what that does is it switches the financial model in America right now, where fee-for-service is essentially we reimburse you, the more services you give, the more money you make. Capitated model is like, okay, we're going to give you X dollars, pay you X dollars for taking care of your condition, and do it as best you can. The problem with that model, with the capitated model, and this is the trick, and we were talking about it earlier in Ithaca, is how do you guarantee that the provider provides quality of care? Because you're essentially saying you run the risk of people just doing ineffective and inefficient or not terrible care. You need that quality metrics in it. So we're very interested in that, and that's where Dr. Price, Tom Price, talked about no bills being introduced in the House. I mean, Tom Price has done a lot of work. I refer you to Tom Price's legislation that is out there that gets to the issue of cost in a way of transparency and utilization. Also, when we talk about this, Affordable Care Act didn't embrace it the way that it needs to be embraced. Tort reform. It is not the panacea of the issue, but it needs to be implemented in America and at the state level. And how do you do that? Or why do you do that? Why do you do that is to prevent the defensive medicine that I talk to many doctors that are hearing and seeing these lawsuits coming down the pipeline. There is a lot of defensive medicine out there. We need to do that as part of this whole package. So that's some ideas. Sir?
Okay, we've not seen the extent of this Obamacare until 2014. And those of us who are on Medicare, we're going to be hurting. My doctor told me that when this thing gets implemented, doctors will not be seeing Medicare patients because they're going to be cutting that reimbursement so low that they're not even going to see Medicare people. And, you know, these people are saying, great for Obamacare. They haven't seen it yet. Wait till 2014. Now they're going to see some results.
Well, I appreciate it. And especially in a rural district, what you touched upon in the reimbursements, especially Medicare and those types of things, for our providers. We've done a lot of work with our rural hospitals and our providers because we're hearing this more and more. And in a rural district, if you don't have providers to provide the care because they can't keep their lights on, you have a real problem. And that's why we've done things like Medicare dependent hospital low volume, worked on legislation with that, worked on it with AMES, the Hospital Association of New York State, because we want to make sure those providers, and the providers, I will tell you, when I get into this debate with the other side on where we're going to go on healthcare, one of the things that keeps coming up, and you see it in the president's budget, and you see it in the president's health department, is they primarily use cuts to providers as the cost containment mechanism. What I mean by that is they are setting Medicare rates, and they're saying, this is what we're going to reimburse. And what happens is, that also goes over into private health insurance, because private health insurance keys off of the Medicare rates and the tables that are there. That has a corresponding effect of not being at a high enough level to keep a lot of these doors open, and the government is the one making these decisions, which is a problem, in my opinion. Du Bois.
Yeah, Tom, first off, thank you very much for the roundtable a few weeks ago in Corning. I didn't hear anybody say thank you at the time, so thank you for that. One thing that I've found that transcends politics is the issue of Common Core. There's as many Democrats opposed to it as there are Republicans, and the more you learn about it, the more you dislike it. HR 5, at one time I understand that you supported HR 5, however, you ultimately voted against it. Now, HR 5 was not the coup de grace to Common Core, but it sure would have kneecapped it for a while. I'm just curious as to why you voted against that.
Well, HR 5, that was the vote to deal with the No Child Left Behind reauthorization packet, the Student Success Act. And when the final legislation came out, and I don't support No Child Left Behind. So the consideration of that bill was, okay, what are we going to do in the alternative to No Child Left Behind? And when I looked at No Child, or the Student Success Act, I didn't see the real, one of the primary reasons we voted against it, I didn't see the real indication that they were going to reject the Common Core provisions and let the states have more flexibility in developing the curriculum and allow teachers to teach to our students. And so that was one of the primary reasons. The other issue that was out there was the whole size of education policy in America. That whole bill, I didn't think went far enough to push to the local and empower the boards of education and our teachers to have the flexibility to implement policy that's best for them. Because teaching in a school in Corning, where I'm from, is different than teaching in a school in New York City or LA. And it just wasn't clear to me that that was sufficiently addressed in the bill. So we did not support that.
But it would have been a start. Now, Common Core is a federally driven, one-size-fits-all. The students in Horseheads are given exactly the same curriculum as the students in PS 152 in the Bronx, most of whom can't speak English and don't care to.
That's bull.
Wait.
Wait till what happened to us in Brooklyn.
Respect,
No.
that would have been, HR 5 would have been a start.
Yeah, well, and I appreciate that, and we'll continue the conversation. It's not going away. I mean, obviously, we got to deal with it, and we're going to continue to. The other concern I have in the education world is it wasn't clear. As I deal with more and more U.S. manufacturing and making that a priority of what we're doing, making it here, selling it there, there needs to be some understanding or some type of indication that vocational training is a critical part of our education policies. And it's not so much in the Student Success Act. It wasn't really, I mean, it was part of it, but it wasn't. It's a secondary issue I raised that we need to make sure we're aware of as we come up with these policies. And because if we don't have those skills, and those are great opportunities, those are great positions and jobs that we're talking about. You know, we have a steel company not too far from here that's begging for welders. And when we go to like junior highs and and talk to juniors and seniors in high school, you know, they're like, I go, what do you want to do when you grow up? And none of them, except for one, said, I'm going to be a welder. And the guy's getting paid $60,000 to start over at Nucor for a welding position because they can't find the skill set and the certificates to do that work. So there needs to be a recognition that in America, not everyone is going to go to Cornell University and come out a journalist maybe. And we need to recognize that there's a skill set gap in America that needs to be addressed in our educational policy. That's more on the higher educational arena, to couple that with it. Appreciate it.
We do have a ton of written questions.
Okay, we'll do the written questions.
Which we're already, well, not going to be able to get through all of them. David just says student loan relief. So, your position on the student loan bill just passed?
Glad we got it taken care of. Glad the House and the President worked on that, getting the students out of the middle of it. And you know, that was one of my biggest problems with the student loan situation, is I started seeing students being utilized as political fodder and political gamemanship in Washington, D.C., and that's wrong. And so what we were able to do in these reforms is get D.C. out of the situation and allow people to have more certainty as to where they're going to be rather than face these cliffs time and time again. So glad the Senate joined us, worked with it, and we got it done and averted the cliff. You know, I'm a firm believer in education. You know, I've got the youngest of 12. Mom and Dad had a deal. All of us were going to get a degree. I got the law degree. My sister got, as I told the group earlier, my sister got the vocational degree of cutting hair, and it's empowered us for a lifetime. So it's critical that we do that. Young man, are you George?
Sure. So why are student loans tied to the 10-year treasury bonds now? Since you're always talking about how interest rates are gonna rise, in which case my student loan rates are gonna rise, doesn't that seem like a relevant issue?
Well, it takes student out of the political gamemanship of being a
But puts us
tool
in the
back and
financial
forth.
gamemanship.
Now, that's why the caps, that's why
I really
the
appreciate that one, thank you, sir.
that's why the caps were in there, is to hedge against the runaway risk of inflationary interest rates.
But wasn't that cap, in the same as the current 6.8%, wasn't that cap that was imposed?
The number, was 8.2.
So even higher, my bad.
Yeah, I think it was 8.2. I got so many numbers in my head. But what, to artificially come in, and this is what elected officials are gonna do to you all the time, who wanna just hand it to you, and I don't do that, is say, I'm gonna guarantee you a 1% interest rate, and you're all taken care of, and everything's good. That's not reality. It's just not the reality of the world.
I mean,
So the reality of
3.4% though, I mean, like, I would've been okay with 3.4%, the US government still made $50 billion off student loans last year. With
Actually, you're gonna
3.4%.
pay less by what we did, because we brought the other loan packages into the market-based approach. So overall, with all the loans, you're gonna pay less because of where the interest rates are. Now, I get you that if interest rates go up, you're exposed. I get it. But it takes you out of DC and having to worry about DC work. The other thing, is we're not talking about the root issue again. The root issue here is what is causing college and university costs to go through the roof. Why are they going through the roof? And I've never heard a good answer to that. And I've asked university professors, administrators, why are they going through the roof? And the question, like we pointed out before, I just had a Ways and Means hearing from the IRS, and they came in and they did a study, a cross-sectional study of average salaries for most of these institutions, because they're not-for-profit, so the salaries is critical to their determination of whether they're not-for-profit. And they came back, do you know who the highest paid people in these universities are? Presidents, football coaches, and investment managers on the endowments. And actually, it's the investment managers who typically make the most. And when the average in the study that was presented by the IRS was about $1 million, is that a legitimate? And then I put it to you as a student. You're a student, right? Do you think it's appropriate for your football coach, I don't know where you go to school, I don't know where you go, I'm assuming Cornell or down the road. Do you think it's appropriate that they make that type of salary and pass that up to you?
No money at Cornell, so they're terrible.
What's that?
That's not the court exam.
Cornell football, not necessarily the SEC. That's her point. But the investment at the investment manager of the endowment at Cornell, I would imagine he's got multi-million-dollar contracts.
I like the fact, I'd like to know that the endowment is in good hands. Yes, I believe that they want to hire the best talent, they have to pay for it. That's something, I believe that's a common.
And I think, however, that that's a legitimate issue to be explored and put out there to say, if you're gonna receive these money, federal subsidy, make that transparent. Put that out. Let the students see that data. Let the students say, what am I getting for my money? And then the other issue that's out there is, and this is an open-ended question, I haven't had a chance to get to the conclusion of it, but we've asked people because we've heard it, is because of what DC has done in regards to cap and student loans and all those policies and everything, have you created an artificial bubble in the higher educational college world because you're subsidizing it heavily out of Washington, D.C.? What that does, the theory, and this is where I don't know if this is 100% accurate, the theory is that if you subsidize artificially the money going into these institutions, they are going to drive up their costs because you're pumping all this money into it. And is it a bubble that's sustainable? And I've got some people working on it. I don't have the conclusion to that. I throw it out there for conversation and for education. And if you have any input on that, I would be interested in anybody to look at that issue. New
Yeah,
voice?
do you know how much they pay at Alfred for room and board per year?
Yeah, I went to Alfred and I think it's what, $34,000?
Well, yeah, that's room and board.
Oh, 34,000. No, I think it's just that. I think it's 34,000 for room, board, and tuition. What's it up to now?
My son paid $32,000 a year total
Yeah.
for her room and board.
That's
That
right.
isn't counting the tuition.
What was the total cost? I
I
thought it
don't
was
know,
around
because
34.
she won a scholarship, my granddaughter won a scholarship for, a $20,000 scholarship, which paid for $5,000 a year on their tuition.
And that's part of the bubble effect that some people argue that it potentially is there, is because, and we've had a lot of people come in and advocate, just send us more money and we'll make it accessible and affordable. And the question I have with people when they come in and ask that, I go, well, where's the money going? What? It's the difference between the sticker price and the gross price. And why are the gross prices going through the roof? If you're just subsidizing, getting down here so you can try to make it affordable, you're not dealing with the root cause of the problem. There are other issues that are legitimate that I think higher education is facing, and they're typical. Healthcare costs, going back to how we're going to contain
I
healthcare
misspoke,
costs.
it's
And other.
$3,200 a year. Yeah, I was gonna say, it was $3,200 a year for room and board. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
at Alfred University?
at Alfred University.
Or is that Alfred State?
University.
Well, I can't, because I didn't pay that back in '89 when I went.
No, she just graduated last, she just graduated.
Yeah, no, I went in 1989 and I was paying, I think I was paying close to 20,000 back then.
She said room and board, not being what she was called room and board.
That's still low.
Anyway,
So, but I mean, they still would have to go to student loan and pay it. I don't think they, I think my son and his wife, whatever it was a lot of money.
so they have the other cost inflators that are out there that we'll touch upon. Healthcare costs, utility costs to run the operations, the infrastructure investments that they have to make, and those are legitimate. So if we contain some of those costs, that might help out the situation. But I think we have to talk about the problem, which is why are the costs going through the roof? So that the students, from their perspective, get the benefit of it, rather than just saying, lower the net cost to make it affordable, because you're not dealing with the problem. All right, there we go.
We have a question regarding the NSA. On August 9th, I'm just reading what's in here, the National Security Agency claimed that its domestic internet surveillance activities touched 1.6% of all internet traffic, which, according to this, translates mathematically into only one email per week sent by an individual, since an average 10 emails per day being intercepted. However, General Keith B. Alexander, head of the NSA, has lobbied for a plan to greatly expand government internet surveillance and cyber defense of energy, banking, and financial service interests. Since essentially the same software will be used for this system and is now under public scrutiny due to the Snowden revelations, how likely do you think it is that Congress would rubber stamp such a proposal for expanded internet surveillance? So I think it opens us up to talking about all the NSA stuff.
This is an area that has kind of risen up, and it was probably one I should have introduced some of the things that's getting a lot of activity, and will get a lot of activity as we go into the fall. A lot of people in the room may have watched, the people that are asking the question may have watched the Justin Amash amendment, with the appropriations process and NSA defunding and things like that. We voted against that amendment, and there's a reason why. The reason fundamentally why we voted against that amendment was you were dealing with an appropriations bill and still leaving on the books the authorization legislation. And I'm very interested in getting to the legislation that authorizes these programs and reforming them. And just as we saw 2 days ago with the inadvertent breaches of privacy and other items that are out there, I think this is right for huge reform in NSA and intelligence arenas. We have partnered up with Marlon Stutzman, a member from Indiana, and we were on the phone yesterday talking about a package that we'd like to introduce to make this area much more transparent, make the court that deals with this area much more transparent, and the actions of the court much more transparent and subject to public review. Also have some type of much more better defined, reasonable, articulable suspicion as to before you can get any access to our private information in America, that there's a clear standard that you gotta get to rather than just kind of a nebulous general type of standard. And the other thing is when you have these inadvertent breaches, just like when your credit card information is breached or the computer systems at credit card companies are breached, that somehow there's a notice to you that, hey, you've been potentially infringed upon, a type of debrief is kind of what I'm envisioning for like these 3,000 people that came out yesterday, or that came out yesterday in the reports that were inadvertently touched inappropriately by going after this information, that they get made aware that that occurred, and that there's a due process course for them to get into and reform. So I think this is better. There is a huge opportunity, because we're going to have to deal with the intelligence, this is DC stuff. the intelligence bill that authorizes these programs gets renewed every year. And if it doesn't get renewed, the programs cease. And so, you know, you gotta deal with the issue of reauthorizing those programs. And that's coming due here in October, November timeframe when we deal with it. So stay tuned. New voice. Do we have a new voice? New voice.
Yes.
Okay.
You talk about saving money and costs and everything. Well, I've never seen anything on print or in graph with our foreign aid. If we're being cut here domestically with the bills that we're working, paying our taxes for, I'd like to see something in print over the last 5 years on how much foreign aid, how much of a cut they've taken.
Yeah.
Because if they're not taking a cut, it's not fair to us.
Amen. I agree.
Okay?
And just so we don't have it, it's not.
Right.
it's not
I've never
here.
seen anything
It's
on foreign aid.
47 billion is what we spent in foreign aid.
Okay.
So, and it's typically right in here, in this
Okay.
pie of it. So it's 47 billion out of the $3.5 trillion that we spent. And it's
How much
being
of a cut did they take?
significant, and significant, and rightfully so.
Okay.
Rightfully, I don't have the number off the top of my head, so I have so many numbers in my head. But they're being cut, and rightfully so, and I wholeheartedly agree with that.
Right, it should be cut. If we're being
Amen.
cut, I've
Amen.
seen my health insurance. I just retired in January. I worked for a Fortune 500 company for over 39 years. My health insurance I have in retirement is worse than what I had when I started in 1973. And no choice, no options. This is what you're getting. And it cost me more than what it was a year ago when I was working and I had better coverage.
Frustrating.
So when it comes to health care, right now, because you talk about cost, I've seen the medical community where when I had insurance, you know, when I was working, prior to retirement of this year, blood work would cost, example, $380, right? But when I had to pay it out of my pocket as part of my deductible, it cost me $100 more.
That's the
You know,
transparency.
and I'm talking, I've seen increases when I had to pay it out of my pocket as part of a $3,000 copay deductible per year. It went from 10% to 30%, all in the same year, price increases.
And that's where that
The
transparency.
system is broke, I'm willing to try something different. So I'm a supporter of Obamacare, because in 100 years, the American Medical Association has done nothing but jack the price up.
Well,
And that's my opinion.
And that's
I'm
fine.
game to try something different.
And I appreciate that opinion, and we're just gonna agree to disagree as to where this goes.
And gridlock and stuff.
Amen.
I've heard about 40 votes on the news of Obamacare to try to shoot it down. Am I fairly close there? And it hasn't happened. To me, that's a dead issue. Representatives are wasting our taxpayers' money by repeatedly trying to shoot it down, especially 40 times.
Well,
Somebody's gotta get the hint, it's not gonna get shot down.
I just want to be clear where we're getting it.
You know what I mean? How much do you gotta repeat
Yeah.
that?
Now, the good news from your perspective, I guess, that the president has made it very clear that he's not going to sign any legislation that deals with any type of reform or replacement of Affordable Care Act. He's going to do it by executive fiat, and that's what we're seeing. And that's what he did. He told us that in the Charm Offensive Luncheon. That's a problem. Now, just so we're all aware. that's
He's the
pretty
one who signed it into law. Why would he sign it out of law?
Okay, but any type of
Hold on,
reform,
define
any type of
stupid.
reform, the employer mandate delay, that was done by presidential directive. You know, and that's a constitutional problem. That is a constitutional problem. And I will tell you, it's gonna be, he's doing it on the caps for consumers. He did that by executive fiat. That's not a problem. But he's made it clear, he's not gonna touch anymore. He said, I gave you 1099, I gave you the Class Act, you backed off of that. No more. We're going forward with it. And so your opportunity to enjoy that policy will be coming.
How is there need? You feel it's hypocritical that you're voting to repeal an act that's going to personally affect your family business, as you called it?
Well, that is just something, obviously.
I mean, it's a clear conflict of interest, no? It's like...
I'm interested in lowering costs, making healthcare affordable, and we're going to continue to do
that.
We can't do it through the government.
All right, we have a lot of people that chose to follow the rules, and try and do that. Ann Sullivan asks,
That's me.
Hey, there you go.
The donut hole, I'm glad it's ending. I've had cancer, my husband has had cancer. We're uninsurable without Obama. I have a grandnephew who, kudos to him, is going into the military in November. His parents can keep him on his insurance until he serves his country. So, you voted to repeal those, and you have to come up with a solution to that. But I'm a senior citizen, and this is my question, and I paid into Social Security my first time in 1965. Until we got to high school, my dad and I had children. Good for them. I got my first Social Security check at 66, 3 months ago. I thanked 4 people when I got that check. And I'm sorry to the Republicans, I didn't think to fix, that was rude of me, and I was emotional, and I called it. I thanked 2 great Americans who did something 30 years ago. Ronald Reagan, a conservative, who my father voted for, my mother didn't. And I thanked Tip O'Neill, who got together and solved the Social Security crisis so that it would be there for me 30 years later. I also thank my parents, both veterans of World War II, who were then in their 60s, who realized that they would have children and grandchildren someday, who would depend on Social Security, who did not sell me down the river by saying, just don't keep my Social Security, and I'm not worrying about the people who are under 55. And I could be wrong, and I apologize if I am. You have said that you will keep Social Security for people like me, for people over 55.
Right.
You have said that you will be open to changing the program for people under 55. I'm not going to sell my daughter down the river, and I'm not going to sell my grandchildren down the river. Spare what my grandnephew is going into the military. Ronald Reagan, a great American, who, as I said, my father voted for him, my mother did. I come from a mixed family, lived